I was thinking about mindfulness and meditation as a path. And I mean, one of the first things that occurred to me when I started thinking about that was that it's not always sequential with all the different parts of development, one after the other. Sometimes they get mixed up. For example, I think that, when I was like 19, I did have quite a strong sense that there was something other than just my ordinary thinking mind, that worked things out, thought things through, planned things, managed my life. And I sort of had a sense that that other way of being could be accessed in a completely different way, partially by just being mindful and meditating. So that happened when I was 19, but I wasn't very self-aware. I didn't really know myself at 19. Some people do, but I didn't particularly. So I took myself off to Japan and went into a Zen situation for nearly a year and did a lot of meditation. And then it was great. I did really well with it. I loved it. I knew I was going to carry on meditating for the whole of my life. And then I came back and got involved in what you could call Western Buddhism. And part of that was just being aware of how you are. And it was quite a revelation, actually. There was quite a lot going on in me from my past and family and all kinds of things that had an impact on me that I hadn't really been aware of. And that then, so I in a way jumped to, the Dharmic vision. And then in a way, I had to come back to a more realistic sense of where I am, what was going on, what I had to work with, what I had to let go of. And I think that just using myself as the example there is a way of showing, well, you can go backwards and forwards. But it's good to have a general sense. I think of three areas. To put it in a way, in a simple way. And they're not necessarily sequential, as I said. One aspect is you're aware of your syndromes, your propensities, the ways that you go off on one. For example, and the patterns of that, the things that trigger you and how you get triggered or how you close off in certain situations, for example, and you start to become aware of, in a way, you could call it the more psychological sense. And I think that it's useful to say meditation can help with that. Mindfulness, particularly, being aware and present and engaged, can really help smooth that out, let go of things, dissolve tendencies. But it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all. Sometimes when there's some quite severe trauma from the past, psychological, emotional trauma, the meditation somehow doesn't quite do it sometimes. And then we need something else. Dance, therapy, or something, just like that. Or a combination. So it's quite good in a way to be aware of that, it's not necessary. You just do what you need to do, basically. Part of the positive aspect and impact of mindfulness and meditation is that it creates an awareness and connection with very positive qualities, which in themselves change and dissolve unhelpful, even disturbing patterns. So just being on retreat sometimes, for a weekend or longer, you can get in touch with very positive qualities, and you come out of the retreat, and actually those things that had caused you difficulty before, they're just not there anymore. They just got dissolved. So there is a way in which that happens. It can also, I think it's important to recognize that if one is very much into the bliss of meditation, that can be very tempting to go to that bliss, and maybe easy to get into for some people, but still there might be lots of unconscious turmoil. And I was very aware of that once. I was living at Vajradaka Meditation Retreat Center. I lived there for 21 years. So I saw lots of people come and go. And there were two young lads. They came in and they were real bliss bunnies. They'd sit down and they'd go, bing, straight into bliss. And when they arrived doing they were like blissed out. And then I led a mindfulness retreat. And they were like, oh dear, going on, what happening? And one of them became very, very conscious of things from his past, which he then had to deal with. So, and did that in the context of a combination of things, therapy and meditation. So, I don't know if there's any bliss bunnies here, but that's just for you, just to be aware of that. So, I think that the process of being mindful in your everyday life has a component that is very important in sorting out one's stuff, just to call it that. Very vague term. And part of that is that mindfulness, what can help you create a momentum where you don't get stuck. You don't get stuck in patterns. You flow. And somehow or another, what that does is that it puts you in touch with very positive qualities, which I'm going to go into in a moment, which have the effect of dissolving stuff. I know that's very vague, but things which, internally give you trouble. So part of the directive of mindfulness is to keep a flow or a continuity of awareness, to keep going. So sometimes things are smooth and easy, and you go, oh, it's great, it's just everything is going well, and I can be quite relaxed, and then something happens. So something difficult. So like, for example, I'm just going to give an example from my own life. I spent a month in Costa Rica, mostly on the beach. It was wonderful. I came back and my 102-year-old mother fell and broke a rib. So then I had to, be very involved in that, go to hospital every day and be involved in all of that. Very different, from being on the beach. So I couldn't hang on to the beach. I had to go with the changes and adapt and, as it were, engage, but keep, and this is the important bit, really, keep the spaciousness and the reflectiveness and the positivity and the openness while going every day to a hospital, trips on the tube and everything. And keeping the relationship, that's the word, I think, between dealing with something difficult and that sense of flow of spaciousness. So that is one of the values of mindfulness. It just helps you keep going rather than just sinking when things get tough. And somehow or another, ironically, the more that you're mindful and in touch with your meditation, I think it's ironic anyway, the easier it is to deal with difficulties, pain and suffering. It just becomes easier. You don't get so contracted in it, caught up in it, more open. So as a phase, you could say there is this sense of being aware and sorting out things about one's life that you need to. And then as a sort of second phase, again, not necessarily sequential, they can overlap, is that as a result of your mindfulness and your meditation and your reflection, you come into contact with quite clearly positive qualities that become part of your life. So for example, a simple example, you do the meditation, the metta bhavana, regularly, the development of loving kindness, care, and then you notice that it changes. That quality of and sympathy for others, difficulty, being more considerate of others, more patient with them when they normally would have irked you, starts to emerge. And it's a clear quality. You go, oh yeah, I'm definitely more patient with others' faults than I used to be. Might be a matter of degree, but there is a change. And so in that way, positive qualities emerge. And I think of these positive qualities, I think a way of thinking about them is in terms of families. So there's a whole family of positive qualities that have to do with direction, momentum, energy, the commitment to practice. So, you have persistence, for example, determination in positive senses. They both got downsides, of course, but a sense of being able to commit. And I've got an example of this. So one of the guys in the house that I live in, he sort of was, I thought he was leaning back from life a bit. He was not leaning into it, but he got this work thing where they took him up into the Italian Alps to teach him how to ski. And what a job, right? It's just a freebie. He didn't have to pay a penny. But anyway, so before he went, I explained to him that when I learned to ski, it was the very first day, it was a lesson for life that has really lasted my whole life. And that is, when you have to zigzag down the mountain. You can't just go straight down because you'll probably hit a tree or somebody. You go too fast. So, but there's a point in the turn where you're actually leaning down into what seems to be an absolute gradient to hell. That's what it seems like when you're looking. It might not be like that. It might be like that. But if you have a tendency to lean back away from committing to that, you fall over. So you learn very quickly to lean into the challenge of the slope, effectively. So I told him this. And he came back a couple of days ago, and he just looked so different. He said, I leaned into it. It was great. That thing of leaning into life, I got it on that first morning. Yeah. And so there is something about this whole family of positive qualities where you commit to being more aware, to working on yourself, to meditating regularly, to dealing with difficulties, to keeping going with difficulties. So it's that whole energy side, commitment side. And then there's the side of just, as I mentioned, in a way, kindness and care and empathy, a sense of connectedness with people, an openness to people that can develop as a result of mindfulness and meditation, which is very positive qualities, and other people, it's easier for others to be that you've become more empathic than for you to realize it. And then they tell you, and you go, what are you talking about? And you go, oh yeah, I suppose so. And then you get it. And then there's a whole family of positive qualities which has to do with, you could say, seeing things as they are, rather than in a delusive world or your own world. Your own. It's like this, and everyone's going, no, it's not like that at all. It's the end of the world. No, it's not the end of the world. You just got a splinter. It's fine. And to just use my mother as an example, my mother is coming up to 102 in a week or so. She's always been very hot on honesty, clarity of mind, what's objective, and she has no dementia at all. And she's very accurate in her language. But when she went into hospital, they gave her a particular opiate, which I told them not to, but that's another story, that sent her into delirium, which is a clinical state where basically she went into this inner world. And when I saw her, went to meet her, she wasn't there. I mean, with me. She was just in that. So, she was in a palace with people serving her with food and everything. Occasionally, people would shout from the kitchen. Well, she was full of shouting people. The whole ward was shouting. But she wasn't in the world. So just as an example, now she's coming, yesterday she was out of that. So I think that the process of being mindful, meditation, helps you notice when you're in your own interpretation of what is happening that doesn't actually jive with what's actually happening, doesn't actually fit. And you start to get a sense, oh, no, that's not right, actually. And that might be in perceptions of yourself, perceptions of others, the whole optimistic, pessimistic range. Everything's wonderful, everything's terrible. Attitude. You start to get, through mindfulness and meditation, a more objective and real view of how things are. And that whole momentum of being more clear and lucid and having acuity can grow and develop over time. People, sometimes when we start meditating, we might not have that faculty or that family of positive qualities very developed. And it can be quite a shock to realize that you need to be more realistic. And other people have it quite naturally, but don't necessarily have the whole empathy, positivity side. Or some people, they're very gung-ho, up for everything, and that's easier. That family is easier for them, and others like, wake me up when it's done, kind of thing. So I think that in terms of just being aware of oneself as developing, this very, very simple model can be quite useful. It's not the be all and end all, but it's just a way of having a sense of how you develop and how you can develop and what you can enter into, what you need to pay attention to. You need to have more persistence, for example, be more disciplined, be more patient with difficulties. Some people naturally have it, others they don't, and you have to pay attention to it. One can always talk from one's own experience. I think that I was probably, when I was pre-Japan, one of the most undisciplined people I know. But doing 14 hours a day definitely helped with that, becoming disciplined. Not that I suggest that you do 14 hours a day, I'm just giving it. I think it's a good idea. No. So, but you get clear that you commit to something and you follow it through and you stay with it, even though the duvet calls early in the morning, it's cold out. You know that the perspective is that it's good for you to get up and meditate, for example. So discipline here is about seeing that doing something actually really helps you, even though it might seem difficult or a bit uncomfortable, for example. So I want to go back to the thing about being aware of oneself, and I want to bring in something quite it might seem, I don't know what it seems actually, I'll just say it. So awareness of temperature. So temperature is being aware of one's own temperature, both physically, emotionally, and mentally, is a very interesting way of being aware of yourself. So you can be a bit cool, a bit distant, a bit cold, in a negative sense, or you can be cool in a sense of having equilibrium and equanimity, unflustered, for example, which is positive. So disconnected, connected. Or you can be hot with passion. Or I like that sound. Or you can be hot for practice. You've got a strong passion for engaging. And it's very interesting to take on the practice of noticing your temperature and the difference between your temperature and the ambient effect. So, what the room or the weather is doing. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, how your emotional state is changing your temperature. And temperature, being aware of temperature is relatively subtle. Relatively. It's more subtle than just being aware of muscles and held tension. And it points you in the direction of subtle changes in your emotionality. So let's just say, for example, you're sitting quietly and all of a sudden you feel hot and a bit really uncomfortable in the heat. So you go, well, is it hot in the room? No, it's not particularly hot. So what's going on? Oh my God, I didn't do my tax. And it's a sort of background anxiety that you weren't aware of, that is having an effect on you in terms of temperature. So anxiety and worry, for example, can change your temperature. Or you get, I'm not going to go into this in any detail, but you realize you're getting hot and then you're having a certain fantasy. And that's why you got hot, for example. But you hadn't noticed it before. It was sort of subliminal or unconscious. But being aware of the physical experience or expression of temperature can help you notice that.